Well, we have the World Championship match coming up soon, and I hope that it will be a very exciting match. So I wanted to show a game that could foreshadow it. It's a game between Gukesh and Ding from Tata Steel Masters 2024. In a
Yes.
previous Smart Moves lessons, we saw their game from Tata Steel 2023, a game that Ding won. And this one was also really interesting, especially because we will see these two players in action so soon. Who are you rooting for?
Yeah, that's always the same question. I mean, it's hard to. The prediction is more or less going like, how much will Gukesh win?
Mhm, mhm.
But I think because this absolute clearness of the whole event, I actually believe it's going to be very tight. And I
Mhm.
wouldn't wonder if there would be a mega surprise out of a sudden. It's a very out, but I'm always the one who's giving the outsider tips. What about yourself? You're
I
looking forward
yeah,
to.
it's pretty similar. I want the match to be close.
Mhm.
I feel like either one winning would be a really nice story. On one hand, Gukesh would be the youngest ever world champion, and on the other, it would be a very nice comeback to see through all the setbacks that Ding had the last year. So I think either one would be really, really nice to see. So I
Let's
want
hope
it to be
that either
close.
of them wins.
Yeah.
And that it won't be like, unfortunately, we have no world champion this time. See you next year. Okay, yeah, so Ding was black in this game, yeah?
Yeah. And it started out with the Italian. So pretty popular opening nowadays. And they went into a pretty typical position
Here's
at
a
around this point.
here's a quick another question. Sorry, I'm not sure how much you have investigated the two players, but what do you think will Gukesh play as white? Will he play e4 or d4? Will he play even the Italian, or will he go like, no, I'm not doing that again?
I don't know their openings enough to say, but I think for the World Championship, it not everybody chooses to stick to their already played openings, and that you have so much time to prepare, and this is the biggest thing you're preparing for,
Yeah.
that they can play something completely different that they've never played before, that they prepared and studied many, many hours just for this match. So I think it's very hard to predict whether they stick with what they know best or whether they prepare something completely
I didn't
different.
know. Actually, yeah, that sounds interesting. Yeah, so I'm almost more curious of what the opening choices will be than the game itself after all. Okay, let's continue.
Yeah.
So it was the
So I
Italian.
was gonna ask, what are the plans here? Do you know what white or black usually does in
Yeah.
these positions?
So meanwhile, I know it because the Italian got a bit popular again, much to my despise, because I loved to play the Italian like 20 years ago, and I was quite good with that. But now that everybody knows it, it's all theory, and
Hmm.
unfortunately, I'm getting yeah, slammed all the time. So normally you get the knight to d2, and then even to f1 and to g3. You can even castle before you get the rook to e1. And another plan, and this is what I see much more often nowadays, is that white is trying to push very hard on b4 and a4, and even push them further to get a lot of queenside attack. That is
Hmm.
what I also do not like. And black, on the other hand, tries also to castle and maybe get the bishop to g4, but also to e6. But I think it's a bit old
Hmm.
fashioned. It doesn't work that well anymore. Another idea for white is also, by the way, to get the bishop to b5 and like force an exchange. Like it's a delayed Spanish version. That's what I've seen a couple of times as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
A lot of arrows we got. For
that's true.
black, I would only add like A6 or A5
True.
to drop the bishop
Very
back,
popular. Yeah.
and also knight E7 with a very similar idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's a lot of arrows. So
Now we know how to play the Italian.
yeah, that's it. So these are all of the typical plans, and we will see some of them actually happen in this game. Castles is the main move for white, but in this game, Ukesh plays a4, to which Ding replies with a5.
There we go.
So very often you play this to maybe prevent the b4 plan that you were talking about, and to also leave some space for the bishop so that d4 doesn't come with a tempo
hmm
sometimes. Okay, white goes bishop to g5. So sometimes it goes to e3. This time he decided to put the bishop there. And here there's some interesting ideas that exist with the moves like g5. And this is going to be very similar to what happened to the game, but he pushed g5 a little bit later. But do you think you would go for something like that before you castle and everything?
That is, well, as my style profile on ChessBase already completely is correct about that. My risk factor with at least my bullet and blitz games is 500%. So
Yes, I
king,
remember you. I remember seeing you sent me a photo of your player profile, and it's risk 500%, king safety 0%.
that's the point I wanted to make exactly. So go for g5, get the king out of there,
Okay.
and king f8, king g7, king g6, attack with the king. That's
Oh yeah, even better. Even better. I love that. So he did end up playing g5 just a little bit later. So first he made normal moves like bishop a7, queen e7, just development for both sides. Now it's in a completely unknown territory. At least no other games have been played in this exact
oh,
position. So this was kind of a new territory for both of them. The knight came to b5 to make use of that square. Then the bishop went away, and finally we see g5 happen. And because of this pawn move, the position has changed. Now it's a bit more closed, and the pawn structure is a bit more defined. Where do you think both sides will castle?
that's a good question. So black is probably not going to castle kingside anymore. Or is it? Because after all, it is a little bit closed. And then again, I mean, I think black has both options. And for white, I just think queenside is too open. So it would be kingside, but it is also a little bit dangerous because of g5 now. Interesting. I know what
Mhm.
you're getting at. So yeah, I'm not sure about this. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so black can castle to either side. In the game, he chose short castle, and you're right that it looks dangerous, but the position is pretty closed, and if there's ever h4 that happens, then we'll play g4 and close it up, and everything's going to be fine. The king can go somewhere like h8 and be pretty safe there as
Hmm.
long as the side gets closed. So short castle works. Long castle is also pretty decent for black, so they can play long castle here. It maybe looks a little bit dangerous with this bishop here, but other than that, I don't think white has enough pieces to start anything major here.
Hmm.
So long castle also works. So for black, both of them work, but for white, it wouldn't be both because um, they would have to go for long castle. That one is a bit better.
Oh, okay.
Short castle is not that good for white because of this whole advance that's already going on. The bishop can start attacking the knight. We can play knight to h5, and this bishop is actually gonna be a bit annoying too. So the knight h5
Yeah.
can take, can play on f4. So it's actually surprisingly safer to be on the queen side.
Makes sense.
So now black plays knight to h5. This is a very typical plan. Maybe you want to put the knight on f4 someday, maybe take the bishop, you'll see. D4 happens, so this is a very typical breakthrough that white usually goes for, especially when their pieces have already developed and the king is out of the way. So d4, black took. Now there's a few captures. Gukesh chose knight b to d4. Ding plays g4, so even though the king is here, he's still pushing that pawn. It looks a bit dangerous, but
Wow.
there was some calculation involved here. Now he goes knight to h4 to get rid of the attack, and black has a really important decision to make now. What do you think you would play?
Well, there's a pawn hanging, but that looks fairly poisoned.
Okay,
So I wouldn't
queen.
just. I think that's not the decision you're talking about.
Yeah, but it's still worth considering because whenever
Okay.
there's a free pawn, you have to think about it.
So I think like
So,
after rook e1, black
mhm.
is already in trouble. I
Yeah,
guess
perfect.
the queen goes to h7 maybe. There's not many. There's no
Yeah,
spot left.
there's not many squares. Black would actually have to find something
Oh,
like knight d4
okay.
to keep it at least possible to play, but this is very, very unpleasant.
Yeah.
And queen to h7 would honestly probably lose because of knight here, here, and then bishop to d6.
That's a nice little tactic.
because the one on b6 is also hanging. So yeah, you are right about that.
Well, at least that. So what is the important decision? The important decision is taking the knight or not, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because out of a sudden, the bishop on b6 is just not that strong, so might as well swap it, get your knight to b4. If the pawn takes back, get a better spot for that one. And maybe get the bishop to e6, because the bishop queen battery is unpleasant after knight g6. That's a move I
Yeah.
just spotted. I know it's not working because of queen g5 check, but still, it's something to consider.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you found a lot of really good things.
Okay.
So that's exactly the thought process that I think Ding also went through. And bishop to d4 is a really great move for exactly the reasons you mentioned. This bishop has not really been a really good piece so far. It's been blocked and it doesn't have much to do. And it's this knight on d4 is much, much stronger than it. So there's also a problem with the knight coming to f5. So that could be pretty unpleasant for the queen in the future. And we don't want to keep both of these knights the option to protect each other there. So we're going to trade it specifically with the bishop because we would rather trade this bishop than not. And we were talking about this e4 pawn. And now Ding actually decided to take it. It wasn't a mistake, actually. It was probably a conscious sacrifice by Gukesh as well. But Ding also thought that he could have some good defense chances and then be up a pawn at the end of all of this exchange. So rook e1, as we talked about, happens in the game. Queen to h7, and now he plays rook to d2. It's a slight mistake. Also, another nice factor is that there's no rook to e7 because the knight is still there. So that's really helpful for us. Bishop d3 would have been maybe a bit better, but it still keeps things very complicated. There's this knight g6 idea you mentioned, but then black can take on d4. So there's just a lot going on, a lot of tactics, a lot of things to calculate.
Very wild game.
And of course, at the end of every complicated position, it's equal. So that's what we have here as well. Instead, rook to d2 happened, so maybe he just wants a double and thought there was no urgency for it. But this lets black develop a bit more with the bishop. Then he still wanted to take control of that f5 square, so he tries to trade this bishop and get the knight to this nice outpost. But everything is great, but only the fact that this knight is not protected by the pawn. It would have been very nice to have it protected by the e4 pawn, but it's gone now, and white is going to need to think about how to defend that knight if they want to keep it there. It was also an option to take on b7, in which case I think black would be pretty happy to trade and just play rook to b8. So this could have happened and we would have had equal pawns, and that was probably one of the last chances that Gukesh had to keep the equal pawns. But who would you rather play for here? Do you think white has enough?
Yes. No, it's because, I'm thinking the whole time, is it even that good for black? I don't know what the engine says, but I wouldn't mind having white here, I think. Of course, the knight on f5 now has to decide where to go to. But but then it's very hard to tell, really, actually, now that I think about it a bit more. So from a king safety point, it almost looks as if the black king is really safer, which is absurd.
Yeah.
And there's another plan I'm thinking about, but it might be too slow. It is too slow. But I thought about the knight going to b4 and the rook to a6, but nothing much will happen after rook c6. I think it's just too slow.
You're right. The knight will come to b4 eventually.
Yeah, this looks very reasonable, but yeah, anyway, so I'm not sure. It's very unclear, but the more I think about it, the more I like black, which is funny because I wasn't like this just a minute ago.
Yeah, when you started talking, you liked white, and then you convinced yourself into liking black's position. Yeah, no, the thought process you went through was very valid, and the actual answer is that black is slightly better, so not by much or anything, but exactly for the reasons you mentioned, that white king might actually be less safe than black's, which is very surprising.
Hmm.
So what we'll see happen is that white defends the knight, then there's a trade of rooks that's being offered, and black is up a pawn, so he doesn't mind trading. So he wants to trade this knight away, which is very annoying um, on f5, so it gets traded. White plays
So
d5.
how come white doesn't swap queens now? That's interesting. White has a
Oh,
pawn more,
here.
no?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Black has a pawn more.
Oh, black has a pawn. Okay, that explains the
So
whole.
black
Yeah,
wants to
thank you.
trade queens.
Thank you. Now I got it.
Hmm. And so d5 happens. And here there is another decision that sort of decides whether black takes the initiative or not. What do you think is the move?
Hmm. Still thinking about knight to b4,
Yes,
but
but
we can also just trade the rook and get the pawn back on top.
so we combine the two. Like right now, knight to b4, maybe the rook on e8 can be taken. So
That's absolutely true. What a pity. Yeah, that's not so
so
helpful.
if we take and then play knight to b4, that's
Thank you.
exactly it. We cannot take the pawn immediately because of the knight, of course, but your knight before idea finally comes through, and
It's
it's a
about
really
time.
good, it's a really good knight there. So queen to b7, so that does create some chances for white on the queen side. So he did regain one pawn, and he's threatening to regain more. But that's not fast enough because the rook joins the attack. So it's a very important principle that we were talking about. Including all the pieces, is never a wrong strategy. So the rook joins, bishop to f4, so he defends this pawn instead. Queen to f5. So now already there's some really nice ideas building up. So there's a very nice sequence that comes up by Ding, who was playing black and who found all of this in the actual game. But I'll give you a start, and then you'll find sort of the most important move of the attack.
Okay, and for you at home, of course, yeah, that's actually what I thought about because it just looks so tempting.
So the first one, yes,
Hmm.
just the check, then
That's the second
this check,
one, and the
and
third
now is the
one.
hard part. So
Oh,
now you
now
can
it's the
think.
hard part. Okay, so this could continue with, yeah, there's a lot of options. So,
Black has only one winning move.
oh, there we go. Okay,
Yeah.
so stop the video. I will give off my thoughts here. Of course, oh, of course, our rook is actually hanging.
Yeah, that's
That's
an
interesting.
important find. Yes.
Yeah, so there's no plan of queen e4 because queen f4 won't work very well. Or will it? Look at that. So queen e4, what would black even move? Ah, it wasn't right. Damn
White?
it. White even, what would white counter
Okay,
here?
I'll just say king here, maybe.
Ah, you're just leaving the business. That's so... Come on, Svitlana, be a
Went
bit more
from c1
fun.
all the way here, as if
Yeah.
I short castled.
You're right. Okay, forget about that. Knight, queen e4 is not the thing. But I thought about, okay, but yeah, it was a good,
Yeah.
very good follow-up. So then let's talk about the possibility of queen g1, because if our rook gets taken by the queen, I think it's not possible because it's checkmate on c1, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, you're on a roll today. That's really good.
Yeah, well, I would have been if I wouldn't have said queen e4, but I had the same idea with the knight on c1, which is blocking d3, which is, of course, that's the beauty about this. So yeah, I
Yeah.
guess queen g1 is a very good, strong move.
Yes, queen g1 was an amazing move, and it's the only winning move in the
Hmm.
position. So the rook cannot be taken. And I guess the alternatives to queen g1, there's no way to continue the attack because the rook is hanging. So you have to either create a threat that will be bigger than that, which is what you do with queen to g1, or play something like rook to e7, but then that gives enough time for white to defend on that first rank, and there's no more big attack coming
Yeah.
up. So that's why queen g1 was a must here, and it's not easy to find at all because you can just get focused on the rook and forget about something so crazy like knight to c1 mate. But this is good. So now it's actually very difficult for white to find a move. So no matter what they play, they cannot, not a lot of ways to defend this g2 pawn. I don't even know which way would be good, but something like this is just too bad for the king. The rook can join whichever way it wants, for example, rook to e4, and then even you can go for endgames where you just, like, let's say you take this and then you take on a4 and you just have pawns. So you don't even have to checkmate in most of these, but you obviously can because the king is super weak on e1. So in the actual game, he goes king to d3. So he decides to go, that's it. He's just going forward and also defending the g2 pawn, which you don't want to give up pawns for free either.
So the last 5 moves were king moves from white, right? I think.
Yeah, actually, that's right. The last few moves were just the king getting activated, just like you said. Knight to b4, king to d4. Do you think this is safe for the king?
Well, it cannot be. So what is the trick here? Let's see.
The funny part is that what black did actually had nothing to do with the king, but more so with the rook.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Is that so? Sorry for cat noises. Our little cat wants to join the action. Oh, that's good. Okay. So our rook is still hanging. That's the thing, which is... Oh, is that checkmate again? No, not Clyde. No, it's not. Okay, that's not working. So what about... Okay, so we have to attack the rook. But the question is queen e1 or queen c1?
I honestly think both of them work.
Is that so? Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Queen, oh, maybe not.
Ooh,
Look at the, maybe not. But queen to e1 is definitely, like, it's basically this square is taken, this one's taken, and this is very bad, so only e2 is left, but then the king is going to be in a lot of danger and is going to get mated. So queen to d1 at the very least. And basically, the rook is kind of stuck, so it's just weird that we're attacking the rook instead. So rook to d3 happened. Queen to e2, we don't even take it. We want to take it comfortably with the queen to e2. And then some more checks followed.
Oh, okay.
And then rook to e4. And this was actually, Gukesh actually resigned because of the fact that king here gets met with queen to d1.
And then...
And yeah, there's going to be mate.
There must be some mate, right? I cannot see it right now.
Well,
because...
maybe like that.
Beautiful. Yes.
Something like that is going to be there, or else white will have to give up the rook. So it was a really nice win by Ding. It was a complicated middle game and a rather clean conversion of this extra pawn into a nice attack. And interestingly, this was Ding's second last win in Classical this year. So his last Classical win was against Warmerdam in the same Tata Steel tournament. But he hasn't played a lot of Classical, of course, so we'll give him that. But of course, he had other non-Classical wins this year, and I do hope that he'll bring his best for the match.
Oh, that's so interesting. Maybe he saves all the wins for this match now, which is
saving
coming up.
the energy, and yeah.
Exactly. That's a huge, big tactic. Great idea. Just lose all the games which are not important and save everything for the World Championships. So yeah, it's so the overall score is 2-1, or is it even 2.5 to a half? I think Gukesh didn't
what I saw is that in Classical, Ding has never lost to Gukesh. He might have lost online, but in Classical, I saw that these two wins from Tata Steel were pretty big, and I think they had a draw, maybe multiple draws, but that's it.
Yeah, I'm curious. It's not long. couple of days, and it's in the morning for me here in Europe, Germany. For you, what time is it? It's going to be, if it's for me in the morning, it's for you. It's in the middle of the night.
Yes. So
Oh
I'll just see it after
no!
I wake up. Or maybe I'll wake up right when they're in time trouble, so that'll be nice.
That's great. Early bird catches the chess players. All right. Thank you, Svitlana. That was great. See you guys. Not next week, but the week after, because we are both very busy, but we could sneak this episode in. Glad we did. Bye.